black.
Well, oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, then I'm even more flattered because he really does look like me.
Well, you're yes. It's the hair. It's the hair. We'll go with the hair, and he's got a mustache.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I don't know where to start. We had some big stories drop yesterday. First, let's go with because we were talking about this during the break. Jack Smith filed a response to Trump's request to indefinitely delay the trial, and you said that you were very pleased with how Jack responded to this. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I hope everybody will read this 10-page prosecution brief. It's double-spaced. It's an easy read. It's a quick read.
Right.
But boy, it's a model of clarity and brevity and persuasion. Jack Smith doesn't mince words, doesn't pull punches, and he clearly understands that justice is a full contact sport. The way he just virtually disemboweled Donald Trump's defense attorneys. He's like, you are wrong. You have things exactly backwards. And frankly, the motion that Team Trump filed had just one ask of Judge Aileen Cannon. Judge, don't set a trial date. And on page 1, Jack Smith said, look at the Speedy Trial Act, the very law that controls this issue. It says the judge shall set a specific trial date.
Yep.
I mean, so Team Trump could not have been made to look any more foolish. And maybe I'm a geek, but when I read those 10 pages, it got me excited about the trial because I think, that is a sign of how Jack Smith's team, which includes some of my former homicide prosecutors, is going to go in and prosecute this case in a way that will really do a service to the American people.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so one of the things that Trump's people were arguing was that they couldn't find a jury. And Jack Smith dissected that. He said that our jury system relies on the court's authority to craft a thorough and effective jury selection process, and on prospective jurors' abilities to willingness to decide cases based on evidence presented to them, guided by the legal instructions from the court. How do you think they're going to do with finding a jury down there in Florida?
I don't want to sound naive or Pollyanna, but I picked juries for 30 years, and some of those cases were high profile. No, not as high profile as the Trump trial will be, but my experience is that jurors take very seriously their oath. They are sworn in, and when they're answering questions about their suitability to sit as a juror fairly and impartially, they are under the penalties of perjury, and they tend to tell the truth. But if they try to hide the truth, Travis, we can sniff it out. Prosecutors can, judges can, defense attorneys can, and the judge will excuse those people who may be trying to sneak on to kind of do Trump's nefarious bidding as a juror. So I think they're going to impanel a fair and impartial jury, and I think the evidence is going to be so overwhelming of Trump's guilt that jury will convict him. At worst, maybe there's a holdout. It's a hung jury, but the beauty of that is we get to retry the case and do it again and again and again. I've done as many as 4 trials in one case, and on the eve of the 5th trial, the defendant pleaded guilty to his crimes. There is no double jeopardy prohibition. There is no due process prohibition. If a jury hangs, you can try it as many times as your sense of justice will allow.
Okay, I love hearing that. And then there's been some talk about having there may be like a case in New Jersey, and they may file additional charges. Do you think that will have an effect on what happens with the case in Florida? Is it going to put a bigger spotlight on? Is it going to put Cannon in a spotlight if we have a decent judge who's not going to bat for Trump every time?
Yeah, what a wild card, right?
Yeah.
If we now see a federal indictment up in New Jersey for him, displaying national defense information in violation of our nation's espionage laws, if we see an indictment in Washington, D.C. for either the documents case, because he committed crimes there as well. That's where he stole the documents from in the first place, or the insurrection, all of that becomes kind of a wild card, because then the different courts and the different federal jurisdictions, even though all of the prosecutions will be handled by Jack Smith's team, will have to coordinate, at least on the scheduling front, with one another to see who's going to end up going first. I don't think there's any way to predict which case will go to trial first. I think a general view is that because the documents case in Florida was indicted first, there's a natural inclination to think it may go to trial first. But as you say, it really is up to the honor, ethics, and integrity of Judge Cannon.
Mm-hmm.
Is she going to cater to Trump and put the trial date way out in the future, or is she going to do the responsible thing and make sure everyone's right to a speedy trial is satisfied, not only Donald Trump's, but the American people's right to a speedy trial?
Yes, and one of the things I haven't had a chance to talk to you about was the whole Walt NADA of the situation, where they said that you guys aren't allowed to talk about the case, which I don't think any of us for a minute believe that's not happening. I mean, what's the old saying? Keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and your co-defendants right by your side at all time. That's what it feels like right now. What do you, what do you think is going on with Walt NADA? 'Cause, I mean, it took a while for him to find an attorney. I don't think having a Trump-approved attorney was the best move for him necessarily. What do you think? What's his situation right now? What kind of exposure does he have?
If Walt NADA gets conflict-free counsel, somebody who is really interested in zealously representing Walt NADA's rights instead of Donald Trump's rights, then I predict Walt NADA will plead guilty rather than go down with the SS Trump. Now, I'm not saying that his current defense team is not going to zealously represent Walt NADA. That remains to be seen. But this guy Woodward is, he's been involved with Trump flunkies for a very long time. So I look to the Cassidy Hutchinson situation as being instructive. She had a lawyer who was on Team Trump, and she was not being truthful with the J6 committee. She was protecting Trump. She got a different lawyer who represented her interests. All of a sudden, she started testifying truthfully about the crimes of Trump and others, and she came out of it okay. Because if she had kept towing the Trump line with that first attorney, she would have ended up a charged defendant in the conspiracy. So let's hope Walt NADA gets zealous representation that cares about his interests and not Donald Trump's.
Speaking of people who may be charged in this, the other big story that came out yesterday from New York Times was that we found out that Jared Kushner has been in front of the federal grand jury. Just first thoughts, what do you think about Jared going in there and testifying to them? Because he was, I remember from like the January 6th footage, he was, pardon my language, he was such a little bitch when he was in there talking to him, and just, you could just tell that he looked like, you people don't deserve to talk to me. What do you think? What do you think of him going in before the grand jury now?
Yeah, so I agree with you. When I saw that clip of him in the January 6th House Select Committee public hearings saying, look, when Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, a guy who appears to have retained some sense of ethics and integrity, kept threatening to resign because of what Donald Trump was doing, I just saw it as whining, and I didn't have time for it because I was busy getting as many pardons out as I could, including for his father. Right? Yeah. Jared Kushner's father. So I agree with your assessment that he was a little you-know-what.
Bitch.
So here's the question.
I'll say it so you don't have to. He was a little bitch.
Here's the question. Does anybody think Jared Kushner told the truth to the grand jury? Now, I gave a spiel to every witness I put before the grand jury, especially if I thought they were loyal to the target of the investigation, the bad guy, the person we were intending to indict. I said, let me make you a promise. If you go into this grand jury and you lie, and that lie is about a material matter, that is a matter relevant to the grand jury's investigation, I promise you, I will ask this grand jury to consider indicting you for perjury, for obstructing justice, and as an accessory after the fact to the target's crimes. I urge you to tell the truth. Sometimes that had the desired effect and sometimes it didn't. But Travis, I hope Jared Kushner went in there and lied, because then he will be indicted for perjury, perhaps obstruction, perhaps accessory after the fact, perhaps as a member of Trump's conspiracy. I would rather see him held accountable for his crimes than have him as a potential witness against Donald Trump. But that's just me.
Yeah. Now, I believe what they were saying is that Jared said something along the lines of, he believes that he won. That was his response. Can Jared get around answering that question by saying, I think he believes that he won, even if Jared knows the truth. And it also gets into the next thing I want to ask you about is Jared was fundraising off of the big lie for Trump after this as well. So does Jared get into trouble with financial crimes? Because if Jared knew he lost the election, we don't know if Jared acknowledged that, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah. Jared has lots of wiggle room to say, this is what I think was in Donald Trump's head. Why? Because you can't prove or disprove what was in Donald Trump's head. Now, if Jared has his own written communications, and I'm sure his cell phone information, his text messages, his emails have been subpoenaed, where it says, oh man, I can't believe he keeps, saying publicly that he won when he knows, and he told me he knows he lost. That is how you put the lie to grand jury testimony about, well, I think maybe he really thought he won. So, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Right.
There's enough objective evidence that Donald Trump was told he lost, and that Donald Trump knew he lost, that, intent is going to be easy to prove. Criminal intent is going to be easy to prove at the end of the day. Just look at the statement he made to his own DOJ officials. I don't care if there was no fraud in the trial. Just say there was and leave the rest to me and my Republican allies in Congress. Travis, evidence of criminal intent proved beyond a reasonable doubt with that statement. So as I say, I hope Jared stayed true to who he is. He lied to the grand jury, and he gets indicted for it.
Yeah, no, here's hoping, because that's the other thing is, like, this is a broad conspiracy. I mean, we're hearing about him, questioning, Arizona, Georgia, and Michigan now. I mean, this could be a huge case with a lot of defendants. Do you think people from Congress could get tied up in this?
I do, and it's really interesting, not to mix apples and oranges, but when you see the, congressional committee hearing headed up by, that whole clown car full of representatives, Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz, attacking the FBI, attacking Chris Wray, trying to defund and destroy and decommission the FBI. There are two things going on there. One is they are forever going to be Donald Trump's lapdogs, and they don't want to lose the support of Donald Trump's base. But perhaps more importantly, a whole bunch of them requested pardons because they knew they'd committed crimes on and around January 6th, right? So they're trying to destroy the law enforcement agency that will be investigating and perhaps prosecuting them for their crimes, them being the members of Congress. So I absolutely believe Jack Smith is the kind of, without fear or favor, prosecutor who will look at those members of Congress and indict them if there's enough evidence to show they committed crimes on and around January 6th. And you don't ask for a pardon if you didn't commit crimes.
Thank you. And the last thing I wanted to ask about, I mentioned it a little bit ago, with Jared, when they were fundraising off of the big lie, because we know that they're also looking into the financial crimes around January 6th, too. Do you think that Jared could be in trouble for any of that because he was running that part of the operation?
Yeah, wire fraud for openers, right? So many potential financial crimes. The devil's in the details. That, those financial crimes investigations are work intensive, paper intensive. There's a lot of records you've got to subpoena, and you've got to get forensic accountants to look at and figure out. But I'm sure Jack Smith has all of that well in hand.
Good. That's what I want to hear. And we were talking about Jack Smith seems like he is not messing around.
No, he doesn't F around
at all.
Yeah,
they're gonna
just read that pleading. Look at his scorched earth language. He knows justice is a full contact sport, and he's in it to win it.
And all I'm saying is he's a Gen Xer like me, so I'm very, very happy to have a Gen Xer being the one who's going to take down Trump.
Yeah, and let me send my love to Stephanie and her family.
Thank
you. We know what she and her mom have been through, so our hearts are with Steph and her family.
And we may have you with us for a portion of the show on Monday. Thank you so much for joining us today, Glenn. We really, really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday. And justice is coming.
Have a great weekend. Justice matters, from what I understand.
I've heard that somewhere, and I hear there's a great podcast and a YouTube channel.
Yeah, there is.
All right. Thank you so much,
and
Glenn.
we've linked to it.
All right, guys.
Yes.
You have a good day.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Good morning, Dr. Redlener.
Hello, Travis.
We need to have
Chris. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
We need to have a word, though, because I believe it was 2 weeks ago before I went on vacation and Stephanie was on vacation, and you were unable to join us because you had a very busy schedule. while you were in Ukraine, and I told you to stay safe, and I said that my mom said you needed to stay safe. And the next thing I know, I'm looking